Hey, welcome to Watch Complications. I'm Brian. Hit that subscribe button and the bell if you want updates. Follow me on Instagram at watch_complications and check out my site, watchcomplications.com. So I was sent a Cove by Feynman Timekeepers. It's a watch that's been around for a while. It's been reviewed heavily. I didn't want to do just another review. So since I already had a Feynman One and now I had a Cove in my possession, I thought, well, if I had to pick between the Feynman One and the Feynman Cove, which would I choose? So that's what we're going to do in this video. So given these two watches, if I was to only select one to remain in the collection and pass the other along, which one would it be? Let's find out. What I want to do with these two Feynman watches is do a little bit of a contrast and compare. Interestingly enough, when I did my extended review of the Feynman One, I had a Feynman One-Eyed Panda, which is the one you see here, and also had the Feynman Eclipse, which is the dark blue. And I was able to take an in-depth dive into both of those. And here we have, again, the Feynman One-Eyed Panda. And then we have the Feynman Cove, which is the Eclipse version. Again, this very, very dark blue shade on the dial. So it's like the Panda versus the Eclipse again, except we have the One model versus the Cove model. When it comes to building a collection, an important consideration is how many watches of the same brand do you get? Now there are some people out there who they'll get 4, 5, 6 of one brand, and that's what they wear. That's fine if that's what you're into. If you've watched the channel much, you know that I really appreciate variety, and so I try to keep that with brands as well as styles throughout my collection. So for example, I have one Rolex, I have one Vacheron, I have one Grand Seiko. When it gets to micros, it gets a little bit more difficult because you want to support smaller brands. They come out with great, unique designs, risks that some of the bigger brands aren't willing to take on many occasions. And they're a good value typically, particularly if you get on a Kickstarter that's worthwhile and with, the right horse, you might say. And just like the bigger brands, they're going to be people who find a particular style that they like and that product they want to support, and they're going to buy up multiples of those. But I do like to stick with a little bit more diversity typically. So for example, I only have one Helios, the Pastel Seaforth. I have one Octilier Win. This is the How Green. I love the red, I love the blue, I love the purple, all great colorways, but I really can't justify, particularly if I like variety in my collection, to have all of the exact same watch just in different colors. Again, someone that might be their thing, they get a model of each. But there are a couple micro brands where I have a couple or a few. Vario is one of those. I just did a review of their trench watch. And Marlot is another one, although I like their older styles and designs better than their newer stuff. So, it just depends, right, on the person, the collector, and what you really like and are into. Now, I don't know what Feynman has coming in the future, so, time will tell. But for me right now, I would probably only want one of these in my collection, although they do have different styles about them, right? The Feynman One is more of a dress watch. The Feynman Cove is obviously a dive watch. If you want two watches of the same brand, then going with a dress style watch they provide and a dive style watch, not a bad route. So I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that love and support this brand and have one of each, maybe more. So as far as Feynman Timekeepers is concerned as a company, the One was their first offering. It's basically sold out at this point. You could probably find them secondhand. And then we have the Cove, which is a little bit newer, but also all of the models have basically sold out at this point. There's a limited edition called Shadow, which may or may not be available at the time you see this video. So we're going to go through a series of characteristics and figure out which one is the one. So first characteristic is style. What really has these watches standing out from, let's say, the regular deal are a couple things. One, it's got a deep three-dimensional look to it. Both of the cases and dials provide that. We have the same orientation with the dials, crowns, where the main crowns have been shifted from 3 to 4, which makes the small seconds on the movement where you would normally see it at 6 o'clock has been shifted to 7 o'clock. So we've got an hour shift by the rotation of the movement on the inside, which provides a unique look. We have a small seconds hand, which is representative of a lizard tail. That's sort of a point of debate and contention among people whether they like that particular look or not. I'm okay with it. Let me pop in here a little closer. We also have the logo in a very unorthodox position here between 4 and 6 o'clock, 4 or 5 o'clock. And it's on a little bit of a raised ledge, has this little nook that goes out from it, and it's just different. And that's a good thing. I actually really like it. One of the things I mentioned is that the logo here is on this darker background with the sort of lighter text. I actually prefer the lighter background with the darker text on the Eclipse when it comes to the logo. I do understand why they did it this way for contrast. So I do like this logo style better than this one, although I do like this overall colorway better of the Panda versus the Eclipse. So style, dress versus dive. Which of these would I choose? I think it's about even. I think dress and dive both complement each other well in a collection. I have plenty of both, and really they sort of vie for the top spot, I guess, in terms of dominance in my own collection. There's other styles like motorsport, aviation, military, and so on, but really for me, dive and dress are the best two categorically speaking, and you need a little bit of both in your collection. They're both nice to have for their intended occasions, those more formal dressy moments, and then those more casual tool, not afraid to get it wet sort of moments. So nice even draw on the style. Let's talk case. Here I prefer the case on the Cove. It's got a much slimmer looking case profile that just looks like it wraps around the wrist a little bit more. Here's some interesting facts about the dimensions on these. The diameters are basically the same, 39 to 40 millimeter. But if you put these side by side and you're looking at them, from top down, at least to me, the Cove looks bigger. And that has to do with the lug design. When you look at these from the side, and by the way, I'm going to put up pictures to help you kind of visualize this without the light and reflections. But when you look at these from the side, the one looks taller. That's all about the case. The diameter looks bigger on the Cove, the height looks taller on the one, but in reality, they're both about 39 to 40 millimeter diameter. They're both 12.8 millimeter height, same style of crystal. They're both 46 to 47 millimeter lug to lug. They're both lug width of 20 millimeter. They both have sapphire with AR coating. They're both about 80 to 90 grams, depending on what type of strap you have on it. These are basically the same dimensions in a watch, but the case designs make them look and feel on the wrist different. The one has much stronger transitions in the way that it's cut, and the planes and the brushing and the coin edge, and then the crown, which is a little bit more accentuated. It's a bigger crown sticking out at 4 o'clock. Looks completely different in terms of the overall size of the watch and dimensions than the Cove, which has dominant polished surfaces, but it's got angles which make it just look and feel slimmer. Those lugs are a lot less dramatic, let's say, and not in terms of the way they catch light. The Cove catches light in a lot better, more interesting ways, which you would probably want on a dive watch, whereas this is a lot thicker, stronger looking, sturdier looking lugs, more finesse on this dive case, which is kind of an interesting contrast. You have a dress watch that has much more tool watch look from the side, aside from the coined edge perhaps, and then you have this very much sort of light catching sort of surfaces and polishing on the Cove, a lot slimmer design, but it's really your tool watch. It's one that's going to go in the water and not going to worry about banging it around as much. So for me, the Cove has the better case design. That takes us to the crown. Now, here I have to go with the one, and there's a singular reason why. Now, the crowns are signed on both of these. You can see there is the F for Feynman Timekeepers, and the crown here at 4 also has the signed crown. You can see the contrast between the blasted look and the polished look. Then we have the crown here at 2, which does not have the F, so you can visually see which one's the main crown. But that rotates the interior 60-minute dive bezel. A lot of dive watches have the bezel on the outside with 60 minutes. This is on the interior, and the crown turns that. So the reason why I say I like the crown on the One better is because it's one crown. I've never been a huge fan of multiple crowns on a watch. That's just my personal preference, but I completely understand the intention behind an interior rotating bezel. However, I would just prefer the singular crown and an exterior bezel. That's me. When it comes to the dials, which model would I prefer? Here I have to go with the One again. The main reason why is I prefer simplicity. Again, if you've been on the channel much or look at some of my other videos, I really do appreciate simplicity when it comes to watch design, and the One has that going for it. The Cove is much more complex. There's more texture here on the interior. Let me pop in here and I'll zoom in here a little bit and show you. It's got a lot more going on here with this wave design. Obviously it's a dive watch, so it's going to have characteristics like that. We have this interior bezel, but that all adds to this sort of more complex look of it. I really prefer the simpler look of the One, which just has the chapter ring, you know, with the minutes, and on the outside you've got the seconds here. So they all have something going on, but it doesn't fill over the top. I prefer the simpler design. So that's one thing. The other aspect of the dial is that I liked the various colorways that the One came in. This is the Panda, there's a emerald, there's a wine color, there's the Eclipse, whereas the Cove was more limited in the colorways. So when it comes to dial, for me, the One wins out. The hands, well, we've got some broader hands on the Cove, obviously because they're loomed and you need to see them a little bit better if you were going to have it in the water. We have feathered hands on the One. It's really just a different aesthetic for the different style of watch. We'll call that even. Anything with watches comes to personal preference, but let's talk movements. We have a hand wound versus an automatic. I typically am going to go with a hand wound if I have a choice between the two. Now, again, that depends on the style of watch. A dive watch makes sense to have it as an automatic, but I prefer hand wound movements. The reason I say that is because I change my watches out every day, or at least every other day, something like that. So, you know, it doesn't really necessarily do me any good to have an automatic movement that's going all the time, because I'm going to change the watches and I'm going to have to wind it up anyway. But I also like seeing the movement in its entirety. Now on the Feynman One, we have an ETA 7001 top grade hand wound movement. It's beautiful. We've got blued screws. It's decorated. It's a great look, and I love being able to see the entirety of the movement. It's a great movement. Again, it's top grade. On the Cove, which is an automatic, yeah, we also have an ETA. It's a 2895 automatic movement. It is also highly decorated, and it's got this blue rotor on the Eclipse model, and yeah, it looks good, but again, that's a big rotor. It hides most of the movement. I almost wish they had used some sort of a rotor with cutouts in it so you could see more of the movement and see more of that decoration. And it really just comes to necessity. If you have a watch that you're just going to have on the wrist and wear all the time, an automatic makes more sense. But if you're going to be switching out watches a lot, and particularly if there's an exhibition caseback, and for me on this, that's the next point, is which caseback do I like better? I also like the One better in this case because it has a completely different approach to it that's a little bit non-typical, and that is you have the glass that runs actually across over the screws that are holding the movement holder in. So you've got this much larger glass area than you maybe normally would. When you look at this from the top, it's almost like it's pulling you into the movement. It almost looks like it's, you know, beveled in toward the center. And that's just a great look. It's also very simple. Feynman timekeepers, they do really great with simple casebacks, which I like. And I don't mean simple in terms of the work maybe that goes into it or the design aspect of it. I'm talking about the way it visually looks. You just got some basic information around here. This is the Feynman One, you know, and the model number, and it's a Swiss movement. And the same thing here, they've kept sort of the simplicity here. A little bit more complex. It's got some dive notches in it, you know, as opposed to screws. That's a big difference typically between, let's say, a dive watch and a dress style watch. But this caseback view isn't as attractive to me, mainly because you don't get to see as much of the movement. Again, they might have gone with more of a cutout rotor. It looks a lot wider. You feel like you're not seeing as much because this is steel around the exterior here as opposed to glass. And that's a visual cue that I think is very interesting in comparing these two watches. They both have some simplistic aspects about them, but this one just draws you in. It's got that full movement look. Dive watch, different purpose though. So that's, just my opinion. I prefer the movement and the Caseback on the One. I will say one thing that's better about the ETA 2895 than the 7001 is that this has about 8-ish hours more power reserve. So you're going to get about 50 hours out of this one, and you're going to get about 42 hours out of the ETA 7001. Cost, we're calling it mostly a draw. It's kind of negligible, particularly whenever you start getting to the secondary market with these kind of things. It's going to be kind of hard to tell. They're all basically around $1,000 US. Feynman Timekeepers is a Singapore-based micro brand, but in terms of US dollars, these are going to range anywhere from about $1,000 to $1,200, $1,300 new, depending on currency rates. But secondhand, you're probably going to be able to find them for a little bit less. Again, depending on how limited, they've been very popular. All the models have sold out, so they've done really well with creating watches that will not be sitting on a shelf. At least they're selling their product, which is a good sign. People are liking their watches, enjoying their watches, and they are beautiful. So cost, we're going to sort of call it a draw because they're all about the same price range, give or take. Now when it comes to water resistance, obviously the dive watch is going to be better. The Cove is 20 ATM, so that's 200 meters, about 650 feet. Whereas the One, which is a dress style watch, is 5 ATM, 50 meters, 150 feet. But that's pretty good for a dress style watch, right? A lot of dress watches are at 3 ATM. This has a little bit more leeway. So this is pretty good for a dress style watch. But obviously being a dive watch, the Cove has a lot more going for it with that 20 ATM depth rating. Along with that, the Cove has lume. And this is where it sort of stands out. And that's just the aspect of it being a dive watch. There's no lume on the One. So yeah, if you're going to say if lume is what you're looking for, of course the Cove is going to be the one to go for. I'm not going to compare the original straps on these. The One came with a sort of lizard style scale leather. It's a beautiful leather strap, but I really like it on this fabric strap from Strap Bandits. This is Huddersfield wool. It's just a great, beautiful dress strap that really matches the black and silver look. The Cove came on this rubber strap. It's nice that it has this design going down the center that matches what you would see at center on the Cove with those waves. So, strap sort of neither here nor there. It's rubber versus leather, or in this case where I've got rubber versus fabric. But that just goes along with the aesthetic overall, dive versus dress. So if I had to pick one of these from my collection, which one am I going with? For me, it's the One, and it comes down to this more simple look, hand wound, the Caseback, the fact that it doesn't have two crowns, it has just the one crown. And even though I like the case better on the Cove, and I like the feel of it on the wrist a little bit better, just for the visual, for me, the One is the One. Let's check out. Well, thanks for spending some time with me today to talk about these watches from Feynman Timekeepers, and thanks to them for passing the Cove along so I could take a look at it. But for me, I'll stick with my Feynman One. It's an amazing watch. I'm glad I have it in my collection, and I would recommend taking a look at it and trying to find one perhaps secondhand. Thanks to everyone who's checking out my watch complications content here and elsewhere on the interwebs. I am out.